Hi, welcome to your first Hollywood crime scene mini episode.
Minisode.
Is that what they call them?
I don't know. Maybe.
It's a mini-sode.
Hi, welcome.
Hey,
So people have been asking us for more content, and we're happy to provide.
yes, we are.
so this week, our mini episode is going to be about the actor Stephen Collins.
Stephen Collins, where do I know that name from?
Well, Rachel, Stephen Collins is probably most well known from the show Seventh Heaven. Did you
Yes.
watch that show?
I was telling Desi earlier that
Cool. So obviously, I know.
I have seen several of the episodes before, but not like by choice really, just that they were on all the time
Right.
growing up and they're
That's a
terrible.
show I like vigorously did not watch.
Right.
Like I made a point of never like I remember seeing the opening credits come on and immediately turning, whereas normally I might just let something slide
You're like, "Oh
in
no.
the background. I was
I
like,
don't
there's
think
no
so."
way I'm watching this. Anyways, if you don't know, Seventh Heaven was about he played Reverend Eric Camden, a Protestant minister, and I think the premise of the show was that he and his wife had 7 kids, right?
They had a shit ton of kids, and in the later seasons, they had more kids.
Okay, so
or
the
the
title-
kids had kids.
Right. I actually knew Stephen Collins a bit from things before Seventh Heaven. He was in some TV movies that I really liked. I just want to mention them briefly because I like this. He played John Kennedy in the miniseries A Woman Named Jackie, which I
Oh.
highly recommend.
Okay.
And he was also in the TV movie based on the Dominic Dunn book, The Two Mrs. Grenvilles, which is loosely based on a real life true crime from like the 50s or 60s.
Okay.
And he played the murder victim. And it's a really good book, which I've read. And I like the miniseries too. But anyways, he's definitely most famous for that TV role because that show was on for like 100 seasons,
Right.
I think.
And it was a very moral Christian
It's very
show.
wholesomely Christian. We watched a clip before we recorded this that was literally anti-pot,
It's,
which is like the late 90s and you're still like hardcore reefer madness. It's just square as can be.
it's one of my favorite pieces of comedy, actually. And I'm going to post the clip on our Twitter account because it's so over the top ridiculous.
It's really corny.
Yeah.
Jeff Sessions probably loved this show.
Oh my God.
Okay. So anyways, that's your background. He's very famously Christian, moralistic, good guy
Right.
type reputation. One interesting thing I did see on his Wikipedia, which I wanted to mention and has really nothing to do with what I'm about to talk about, is that he's a practitioner of transcendental meditation. Which I
No
found that very,
shit.
very odd. And it said that he had taken part in an advanced TM yogic flying technique since 1980. I don't even know what that is, but it sounds like very spiritual. He's not that spiritual. Anyways, in 1985, he married an actress named Faye Grant, and they do have a daughter together. She was born in 1989. And so the story really starts when Stephen and Faye start divorce proceedings. He filed for divorce from her in 2012, and that's when shit really hit the fan for him. So they're in the middle of a nasty divorce, and in 2012, I guess they were in therapy for some reason, and during one of those therapy sessions, Grant decided to tape the session because she had heard some information previously, and she almost baited him into revealing it again during these therapy sessions. She had been advised by her lawyer that it's legal to secretly record people when someone is committed a violent felony, and molestation
Really?
is one of those felonies that would count as being legal to record someone admitting to.
That was the thing I always wondered.
With
How
what she
did they
Yeah.
get the tape out?
Well, initially what happened was the tape was released somehow to TMZ, and TMZ is the outlet that broke this story. You can actually hear the tapes that are still up on TMZ, actually.
I've heard some
Yeah,
of them before.
So in this tape, Collins confesses to molesting an 11-year-old girl in New York who was a relative of his first wife. This is a direct quote from the tape. he says, there was one moment of touching where I put her hand on my penis. Then he also acknowledged a couple of times that he exposed himself to several girls who were about 11, 12, and 13, I think in the late 70s and early 80s. So Grant really pushes him in these tapes. At some point, she says, when you exposed yourself, did you have an erection? And he answers her, no, I mean partial, maybe, I think. So he's like pretty sketch and either doesn't have a great memory of these events or is whatever, not remembering on purpose. And the other girl, I think, one was in LA, and she was like a neighborhood girl that he did that to. And he said that he apologized to her right away. And then he said that there was another girl he exposed himself to in New York around the same time, early 80s, and she was also about 12 to 13. So in addition to leaking this to TMZ, Grant also gave the tape, a copy of the tape to the NYPD, and they interviewed her. Like they flew someone out to interview her in LA, and they actually started up an investigation at that point. They were investigating at least 3 victims, and the investigation was regarding inappropriate sexual contact with minors. So I think I already mentioned one was a relative of his first wife. And at the time, so this is like what, 2014? No, 2012. Because of the nature of the crime, even though a lot of time had passed, they were still able to possibly prosecute.
There wasn't a statute of
there wasn't a statute
limitations.
that had been met yet. So he was pretty mum after all of this went down. And then in December of 2014, he gave a sort of a written confession to People magazine, of all places.
Wow.
And he went into pretty vivid detail explaining what had happened from his point of view. Now, in this thing, he said that he had 3 victims and he had inappropriate sexual contact with them in 1973, 1982, and 1994. So it actually went up into 94.
Wow.
And then he is in that interview or confession or whatever you want to call it, he said he had not had an impulse to act out in any such way in the last 20 years. He also wrote about why he hadn't said he was sorry to the people he had assaulted or exposed himself to. And he said 40 years ago, which is like only counting the 1973 one, I guess. I guess he counts that one as the worst because he actually had her touch him. Whereas the other ones were just exposing himself to the girls.
So he thinks of that as the most
egregious one, right? I mean, I don't know. 40 years ago, I did something terribly wrong that I deeply regret. I have been working to atone for it ever since. I've decided to address these issues publicly because 2 months ago, various news organizations published a recording made by my then wife, Faye Grant, during a confidential marriage therapy session in 2012. The session was recorded without the therapist or my knowledge or consent. On the recording, I described events that took place 20, 32, and 40 years ago. The publication of the recording has resulted in assumptions and innuendos about what I did that go far beyond what actually occurred. As difficult as this is, I want people to know the truth. I did have an opportunity to do so with one of these women 15 years later. He's talking about apologizing. Mm-hmm. I apologized and she was extraordinarily gracious. But after I learned in the course of my treatment that being direct about such matters could actually make things worse for them by opening old wounds, I have not approached the other 2 women, one of whom is now in her 50s and the other in her 30s. So he kind of apologized and then basically said he didn't because he thought it would make it worse for the victims. How do you feel about that? I mean, both of us have been victimized.
Right.
And I, as much as I don't want to give him any credit, I kind of agree that I don't really fucking care what they would say.
Yeah.
And at this point, I feel like it's just for them to feel better.
I actually got a letter one time from my abuser. And it didn't, and it was a really bad apology too, because he's such a shitty person. But I also just feel like I don't want any part of your recovery. I don't want any part of you. I don't want any part of you in my life.
Right.
Fuck off and die forever. I personally, me as someone who's been victimized before, I don't fucking give a shit about their apology, because to me it is all about them atoning for their own sins and not making it right necessarily. Like, I don't care that they got it off their chest and they feel better.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not like, I can't speak for every single person who's been victimized before by this type of crime. I'm just saying from my own experience.
Right.
I don't give a shit
in
about
my
the
own
apology.
experience also I don't know, I would actually, I don't want to say that it would traumatize me, but it would be if I got a letter in the mail or something from my dad or whoever,
Right.
it would freak me out.
Yeah.
So, and I've already moved on.
Right.
So I don't know. I think it would be worse, but I don't want to give him any credit because I do think that in some ways he might just be a pussy also, but he's like, oh, look here, see, I'm doing the right thing by not apologizing.
Yeah. I just don't care about the abuser's feelings.
I don't either. And
you know,
I honestly don't really believe in forgiveness in certain things. Like in this sort of thing, I don't feel like people need to forgive to move on. They can move on without having that aspect of it.
I totally agree.
I'm not like one of those people who are like, then you can move on. Like, I've moved on. So that would only bring things back to me.
Well,
I don't know.
I think when it's like a crime that's particularly heinous.
Right. We're not talking about someone who cheated on you even or something of those lines.
This is something that affects the rest of your life in a horrible way.
Right.
I feel like when it's this kind of crime, forgiveness, I think you have to forgive yourself. I think that's part of it, but I don't necessarily think that you have to forgive in the traditional sense the abuser.
No, and I don't even know what you would be forgiving yourself for, actually.
Well, I just mean giving your, like, for myself, like a lot of people who are victimized think it's their fault.
Oh, okay. So I
Like-
never did that. So that's why I was like, well, what am I forgiving myself for? Yes, forgive yourself for making you think it was your fault.
Right, you have
Not
to-
like forgiving yourself for doing anything
No,
or putting
I'm-
yourself in that.
I meant
right.
forgive yourself.
Right,
Like, be forgiving yourself, and also that part of that, for me, part of that making amends to myself is going
Not
to
blaming
therapy.
yourself,
Not
yeah.
blaming myself.
Right.
Going to
Got
therapy.
it. Okay. I just wanted to make sure you weren't victim blaming yourself. No, I'm just
Oh my
kidding.
God, please, honey.
Okay. So, yeah. Then he also gave an exclusive interview with Katie Couric, which I think it was like, when I looked it up, it was literally like one of those things that were so 2000s, like AOL/Yahoo.Newsnet, like one of
Wait,
those.
really?
things. Yeah. Katie Couric, I guess, had some kind of weird show sort of thing on
this
AOL.
is before.
No, this is after. This is after. So this is like 2014. This
So
interview.
she had a weird old-timey thing.
It was still called AOL/Yahoo.
What?
I know. Doesn't that seem like it was like 100 years ago?
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't. So in this interview, he gets like into a little more detail about things. First of all, he's very adamant that he is not a pedophile. In his words,
Sure, Jan.
in his words, a pedophile is someone who is mainly or wholly attracted to children. I'm not. I had a distortion in my thinking where I acted out in those ways, but I'm absolutely not attracted physically or sexually attracted to children. I'm just not. Okay. I don't really know. I think it's maybe true that you cannot be.
I think you can be attracted to both or have. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be a pedophile. I have no fucking idea. But like, I feel like I feel like he can think exposing himself to children is hot while at the same time still think fucking a grown woman is hot.
Right.
Because
I don't know if pedophile is actually defined as only being attracted to children. That's where I don't know.
That's what I don't get.
Because most of the people who molested me were fucking women too.
Right.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so, well, first of all, who fucking cares? I don't really care, like, what your primary attraction is. Like, when you break the law and do that. I don't know what I guess when you're doing something horrible, you really want to distinguish yourself from people who are even more horrible.
It's like when you rape someone, but you've had consensual sex before in the past, you're still a rapist.
Right. Like when you rape your wife or girlfriend.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, whatever, Stephen. So he goes on to explain more about what he did with that girl, which the first one, which he, I guess, thinks is, like you said, the most egregious, and he describes as unthinkably wrong. he I guess I don't know what he quite did, but he explains it as he took her hand and moved it in such a way that she was touching me inappropriately. So it sounds like this is a person that sounds to me that they know what they're doing is wrong and they're trying to make something accidentally
Right.
happen.
Oops.
Where it's like he has like whatever plausible deniability.
Yeah.
He also revealed to Couric something about what happened to him as a child that he said may have contributed to his bad behavior. This is his quote. I did have someone in my life when I was between the age of 10 and 15, an older woman who repeatedly exposed herself to me. He didn't blame her for his actions. But then he goes on to say, I did these things because for whatever reason, I'm sorry. I meant the wrong quote. He said, I think that distorted my perception in such a way that part of me thought, because I never felt like I was molested, it never occurred to me, that word never crossed my mind as a 10 to 15-year-old boy. It was a very intense experience. But I think somewhere in my brain, I got the equation of, well, that isn't so terrible. I mean, the person who I trust is doing it. So it sounds kind of like he is saying it was responsible for his thinking then in that second quote, right?
Right.
Because he's saying what she did was not that horrible.
Because he also, it's not that he did this for a minute in his 20s, like in the 70s. I assume he was in his 20s then.
Right.
But he also did it in the 80s. He also did it as late as 1994.
And he clearly knew.
He knew it was wrong.
It was wrong. Like, I feel like sometimes I've heard other child molesters really seem like they're in a different mindset. Like, this is someone who clearly knew. I mean, I think they always know they're doing something wrong, but like,
Right.
This one seemed like he really was stopping himself. So it's like, why couldn't you just not do that one stupid thing? Like, you didn't even like.
Yeah.
I mean, he was truly pushing the line, I think.
Something about it got him off.
Right. And then I have to say, I would like to hear a little bit more about this older woman who exposed herself to him. Because he's not even saying she did anything to him, just exposed. Like, what is this? The woman like opening up the door in her robe? Like, is she just some horny housewife in the neighborhood? Or is this a fabrication? Like,
I don't know.
I don't know. So then he goes on to say, I did these things because for whatever reasons. Okay, Stephen. I tried very hard in the last 20 years to understand I did them. I'm not saying, this woman did this and therefore I did it. So I don't know. So he was in treatment for 20 years. He said he felt remorse for his victims. I had mentioned before he had personally apologized.
So he went to treatment after the last time he molested someone? Okay.
Yeah.
Treatment for 20 years. There isn't Child Molesters Anonymous. Was it SLAA maybe?
I don't know. He didn't say, but maybe it was just therapy.
Right.
It didn't have to be specific to that.
Right.
And then I think I mentioned before he didn't want to reach out to the other ones because he didn't want to open up old wounds. But he apologizes in the interview. He said, I think of those women every day. And I would say with all of my heart, I am sorry for what I put you through. And I want you to know that nothing like that will ever happen again. Now, I'm sorry. Isn't him going on doing this interview and all of this, bringing up the pain for those women just as much as apologizing?
That is a good point.
Right.
I never thought about that because now it's very public.
Right. And he, beyond the public, like he can't help that his wife released the tape or whatever,
right.
But he didn't have to go on all these apology tours.
Right.
And like
putting his face on TV.
Right. And it's like, I see wanting to explain your side of the story when you're innocent. But when you're actually guilty, I don't know what he said here that we didn't already get from the tape. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like she made wild accusations. We actually heard his confession on the tapes. Right. So I don't really quite know. I don't know. It's not like he's denying it. It just makes less sense when he's actually confessing to everything. I don't know. It's a conflict.
I get that he knows, he does seem to know the difference between right and wrong.
Right.
Like, I don't think he's a sociopath. I just think that he's still not owning up to it completely.
Yeah, it's sort of not completely. Then he also claimed in this interview that Grant recorded the admission during the therapy so that she could get him to sign a divorce settlement that was more favorable to her. She released a statement responding to that, saying that Stephen's statements about me are false and appear to be an attempt by him to deflect from his contact. I sincerely hope Stephen gets the help he needs, which is like an all-time great thing as an ex to say about someone, right?
I
like,
hope they get the
I
help
hope
they
they get,
need.
yeah, where it's like,
Right.
I'm a good person, but,
But
I'm
fuck
also
you.
like, that is such a great, like,
It's such shade.
a nag shade, right?
It's such shade.
I really hope they get the help they need. She could be a horrible person too. I have no idea, but she didn't molest children.
This is not her story.
So according to him, though, she said to him, "Here's our settlement. You're going to sign it now, or this recording is going to find its way into the media."
Wait a minute, but I thought he didn't know about the recording until it hit the media.
Well, this is what he said in the Katie Couric interview after the fact. And like I said before, she denies even leaking the recording, but how the hell would it have gotten out otherwise?
Right.
I love that. And then also, okay, here's another thing after the fact. Stephen actually sued Faye at some point for $1 million, claiming that because of what she did, he lost work, which is true. He did lose work.
And they took Seventh Heaven off all the stations out of syndication so that all those other actors, they don't get residge checks anymore.
Oh, so they should all be suing Faye too, or him.
They should. I would be fucking pissed.
And he's saying she had no right to do it, to record him, and she was responsible for leaking the tape. He wanted $1 million, and I think that would have just been deducted from her share of the community property, which is about $14 million. I actually didn't see if there was a resolution to that.
So he's got money.
Yeah, I mean, he's been on TV a long time.
Right.
So like you said, he was, that show was basically taken off the air. I think at the time he had a high level position at SAG, which he was dropped from. He was dropped from a recurring role on Scandal, and he was fired from a role he had in the upcoming movie Ted 2.
I remember that.
And he was also dropped from his talent agency, the Agency for Performing Arts.
Well, if there's an opening, I'm available.
Yeah. And then, so like, there was like talks of a Seventh Heaven reunion, and the woman who created the show, her name is Barbara Hampton. She's like all on board with including Stephen.
No way.
Right. She said, I would include him. I think all the actors would love to do a reunion show. It'd be really fun.
I don't know how Jessica Biel
I don't
would
think
feel about
a lot
that.
of the other people are on board. And in fact, the actress who played his wife, Catherine Hicks is her name. She said she'd only do a reboot if Stephen's character was killed off.
Good for Catherine.
You know what? That's what I thought until I saw another interview that was more recent from 2017. Where she said she's ready to forgive if the show's creator hinted that a reunion show will really happen. So clearly her work dried up in between her hardcore statement of no way.
She stopped getting those residual checks.
She stopped getting those residual checks, and now she's like, you know what?
Let's forget.
He kind of said he's sorry to Katie Couric.
It happened so long ago.
And then there is still an ongoing investigation in charges remain open in New York City, but it doesn't really seem like anything's going to happen at this point, right?
Well, I wonder if the women even want to go through the
honestly, like I was thinking this.
That.
So much of that shit happens to us throughout our life and throughout most women's life. Do you think that they even remember?
Right.
Like, do you know how many times people expose themselves to me? I know that sounds ridiculous.
No, I do.
And not just like, I'm not talking family members. Like, I remember walking in the street, people pulling over in their car and jerking off. Like, I saw a lot of that shit growing up.
I was I was about 14, maybe 13, and I went to the ladies' room at this restaurant back home in the Bay Area, and I'm sitting down on the toilet to go pee, and I look up, and there's a man staring at me through a window, like a little like he's standing up on something. There's a window high up on the wall, and he's just looking at me, like looking, and the expression on his face looked like he was jerking off.
Right.
And I was in the middle of peeing, so I couldn't, I had to hurry up really fast, and I ran out of the bathroom, and I was with a family, I was with a friend and her family having dinner, and I told my friend, and, we're like 13 years old, and gross, and like, and I remember feeling really, really violated, and it was awful, but that guy didn't get caught.
Right, and he probably did it to a bunch of people. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I feel like the first girl knew who he was,
Right.
because she was related to him or related to his wife.
And by the way, we're not saying that, oh, whatever this stuff happens, get over it. We're saying that it's
I'm
horrifying.
more talking about,
how,
do they even remember?
It's horrifying how
that it was
common
him?
it is.
Because
Is
I
what we're
think
saying.
I'm thinking he said they were just neighborhood children, right?
Right.
Like, so yeah, I mean, I feel like it's weird to think he's telling this stuff, and there's women out there who might not even know that it was him,
Right.
and putting it together. But yeah, it's a weird story.
Yeah.
And anything that's like, I think because I grew up in a sort of religious family, you guys might not know this, but my family was Mormon. My mom was not Mormon, but I was very involved with my grandmother and all of that stuff. So I'm really fascinated by the moralistic, religious type people. And even though that was just his character, it still kind of makes it more fascinating when they're selling you this bill of goods and then they're secretly fucked up, sex depraved type people. Like,
right.
I mean, there's a lot of it, obviously.
Right.
I always just am fascinated by these stories, and I actually have a lot more I want to do on this topic. Because they're pretty much a dime a dozen.
Right.
Because when you are not sex positive, that shit comes up in bad ways sometimes.
It does. It does. And yeah, it's wild. It's like, yeah, I mean, when you said like they might not even remember who he was, like, I think that for me, that just goes to show how common it is.
Right.
And like when you're a kid, and like I feel like every child has some
story
where something creepy happened to them, not necessarily that they were molested, like physically touched.
Right. But there was always those people where it's like, don't go to that person's house, or there's a creepy guy at the store, like whatever.
Right.
Right. And I only said that about them not remembering, not because I don't find it would have been traumatizing, but like we said before, it happened to me pretty frequently, enough where I couldn't tell you who all of them were, like just people in the neighborhood
who were creepy.
Right. So yeah, it's just like it's weird, I think, to have it be so public. Because obviously someone who exposed themselves to me is not on TV talking about it.
Oh my God. And like, I don't know, like, again, going back to the, like, would I want to be apologized to? Like, if it was something like I have enough trauma that I remember that happened to me.
Right. What if it was something you had forgotten or
like
regressed, right?
Honestly, like, that's the thing that scares me. There have been times where I've like, you know, been going through it, and I'm just like, what happened to me that I do not remember, that I'm suppressing?
I always think that.
And I'm always afraid that I'm going to remember something
because obviously
awful.
If you follow me on Twitter or have heard any of these shows, I do joke a lot about my trauma. And then part of me does get scared sometimes. I'm like, is that because I've regressed all the really horrible things?
Right.
So it's like, these are the ones I can kind of make fun of. And then all the really horrible ones are like deep inside of me, ruining my life.
Right. And like, I've been through years and years of treatment for my own stuff, but like, oh my God.
I haven't. Don't hypnotize me.
Some of us are drug addicts and need an extra boost.
Right. I'm not saying I don't need it, and I don't have any disrespect for people who do treat their trauma. But I'm like old school. I'm like a Marine.
Desi really is a Marine.
I'm like a Pat Conroy book where he has like the military family and you just suck it up. Suck up your pain and move forward. It's very unhealthy. And believe me, I have panic attacks all the time. So I'm definitely not a role model.
But yeah, that's Stephen Collins.
Yeah. Thank you so much for our first bonus episode. We hope you liked it.
Mini episode.
Or a mini-sode, not bonus.
Yeah,
you're right.
These are always going to be free.
And yeah, thank you so much for listening. And as always, check out all our social media accounts at Hollywood Crime Scene. Most of them, I think, are Hollywood.
Everything is Hollywood. Facebook's Hollywood Crime Scene. Instagram's Hollywood Crime Scene.
Only Twitter.
Twitter is H Wood Crime Scene. And donate to our Patreon. If you have the means, it's patreon.com/Hollywood Crime Scene. There you will get access to our secret episodes.
Those are the bonus.
Those ones are super nasty.
Yeah.
You'll really love those.
You can laugh at those without feeling guilty.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you let out a few chuckles during this episode, we totally understand.
Well, yeah. There are some ridiculous aspects of any horrible story.
Right.
That's what I tell myself about my life. Anyway,
we'll see you guys on Monday.
Okay, bye.